All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is the CastNet podcast. My name is Mahendra Gossai, and to my right I have
Ryan Sahadeo.
And to my left,
Kevin Rain.
All right. In today's topic, we're going to be talking about travel. A lot of you travel, and we thought maybe it's a really interesting topic for us because we've done some recent traveling, and we kind of wanted to share some tips that we've all had. Some of us have connections for travel, and some of us travel for work. Some of us have traveled in the past for work. We also have different destinations we've been to, and also destinations in the future that we want to go to, right?
Yeah,
as long as talking about as well our own beloved Central Florida area right here too, talking about that and what places to go. So before we begin though, how are you guys doing? Doing all right?
Doing great.
Not too bad. Can't really complain.
Yeah, we're doubling up our podcast, so we actually just had some lunch there, and we're getting right into it. And we're, thank you for joining us. And some housekeeping notes. Make sure you like and subscribe to get all the content up to date when it's released, usually at 3 a.m. or something like that for all your content needs. It helps support us, and it also helps us keep the podcast going. All right. So, I think starting off with the travel topic, as was mentioned before, I think talking about maybe some tips on travel, right? Mm-hmm. We all have different experiences with travel and stuff, but does anyone want to kick off maybe some travel tips?
So I think I'll start off.
Okay.
I've seen something recently on social media that's becoming a big trend. And I don't know how about you two feel about this, but have you guys seen those skits or just videos in general about people getting their travel agent license and using that as a way to save on trips? Because as an agent, whatever company you sign up for, you do get access to, a trip as a thank you for signing up. And it's a $200 license. But then you also get discounts to other locations.
Wow, I did not know that.
And apparently it's becoming very, very, very popular. And so I've seen that as a major trick or hack, if you will, about, most people trying to save on the cost of flights. Because apparently with everything going on in the world today, the flights have gotten expensive, right? So you got to try and save where you can. I know a lot of people also, when you go to the airport and you check your bag in, sometimes you hear from the counter agent, hey, your bag's overweight. Rather than spending $70 on an overweight travel bag, I've seen a lot of people bring a pillowcase and will stuff stuff in the pillowcase. Because actually you can bring a pillow, and so for everyone not watching on YouTube, I just air quoted the word pillow. You can bring a pillow through TSA and it's not banned, so they don't actually check what's in the pillowcase itself. Apparently, so many people have gotten away with this. It's apparently the second favorite hack that I've seen people use.
Okay.
And then I think the last hack that I'm going to mention, or tip that I'm going to mention, is I think a popular one that a lot of people tend to think works, I'd say it's hit or miss, is the time of day when you buy a ticket. So obviously I think a lot of people who do traveling, or any of our listeners love to travel themselves, they know usually when you plan a trip, you want to try to buy a ticket early as possible. There is some truth to rumors about buying tickets on a certain day and time. I believe the actual time that you can get cheap flights is, I think it's Sunday night around midnight and Tuesday night around midnight. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but I think that's what it is. But yeah, I think that'll be the third tip that I mentioned for that. What about you, Kev?
I'll answer it in two parts. So when I think of travel, flights are the first come to mind, but also driving is an option as well. It all depends on the on just the route itself. But I do that kind of cost benefit analysis for either driving or taking flights. I guess it depends how many people you're going with. It's worth considering, but you mentioned flights are expensive, gas is getting expensive too. So electric vehicle that might bode a little bit better than flying sometimes, or We have public transit options here in Florida, Sunrail, we've all traveled with that. So I think the method all depends on kind of the distance, like the party size, like who you're traveling with, like their preferences towards, driving, flying, some people are a little bit more apprehensive, but, I try to get the best deal where I can, but I can't drive for more than like 2 hours without stopping. So it's not the best for me. So I tend to fly. So a lot of my hacks and tips are around flying. And I guess I usually break it down into like a couple of components, but basically first sourcing the flights, like where to look, time of day to look. I have some tips on that. So I've sworn by just Google Flights now. I used to use like any of those big name comparer sites for flights, but I find Google Flights does a great job at aggregating everything. So I usually go there. I guess like some tips around there. Time of day you look, but I've employed also like a VPN, and I sometimes set my location to like smaller cities or like more rural cities, second cities, just to kind of see rate comparisons. And
wow.
And I do actually get great deals that way. Like I know me and Mahendra took a trip not too long ago, and I kind of sourced flights in that manner, kind of looking as, out of state, what the rate would be. And I think they're like with cookies and online tracking, they get so good at knowing like, oh, this is the same repeat IP address that keeps checking flights. Like,
okay,
right.
Maybe like let's like kind of prey on them a little bit, depending on how frequent you're checking. It might be a really important flight, and they could game it on you that way. So yeah, I think it's important to kind of just have that in your arsenal as you're comparing flights. And then booking it, I think there's a lot of arguments on like the airline of choice, but ultimately it depends on kind of where you're based, if there's a hub nearby, if the routes kind of where you want to travel, and if the airline services those locations, it all factors in. But for me, I think as I've gotten more seasoned in traveling, I kind of look for more convenience. I value that a little bit higher. So I do a more aggressive cost benefit analysis there, or just like I'm a little bit more flexible on cost, whereas my earlier days not so much. I'd be riding on Frontier just to kind of get the lowest possible price. But
Right.
there's so many factors that go into it. But as we go through it, I have like some hacks and tips on all of it. But
Fair.
Just the early phases, that's what come to mind.
Before we let Mahendra give his take on this, I do want to, for our listeners, kind of break down a little bit of what you kind of touched on there earlier. So for those of our listeners that are unfamiliar with how most travel sites work, usually whenever you go on your internet browser of choice, with the exception of, I think, a small handful of browsers, depending on what website you use, they do track your session with what's known as a cookie. And every time you go back to that website thinking that you might see a cheaper flight, they tend to track how often you visit, and so the prices will spike, or they differ in pricing depending on time of day. So Kevin mentioned using something called a VPN, which is a virtual private network. There's a bunch of different companies that offer this service, but it basically hides your location, and it allows you to change location and change kind of where you're viewing certain websites from. Netflix is a website that opposes this because they geo-lock shows and stuff like that into certain regions, so people get around that through a VPN, for example. But in the case of flights, you can use a VPN to try to see if you can find the best deals. So that's what Kevin was touching on before. So sorry, Mahendra, I didn't mean to interrupt before that.
No, that was a good clarification. Actually, I think I wanted to extend on that a little bit.
Sure.
Could you tell the audience a little bit more if they were using, like, in private window, if they go to masking, if that would help or not?
Right. Okay. I would say it depends on your browser of choice. So I would say a lot of people tend to default to maybe Google Chrome or Mozilla Firefox. I would say for certain websites it does. I would say for others it does not. Kevin mentioned Google Flights. I don't think Google Flights really does anything. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong here, Kev, but I don't think they really track based off, because they're an aggregate site, meaning they show all results as opposed to certain results. So I think the answer to your question, Mahendra, is based off of website and browser of choice.
All right. Well, there we go, people. Lots of technical answers there for you while you're just trying to book your family vacation. So
sorry, guys.
Yeah. So I think that's really neat as far as the tips is concerned. I kind of wanted to extend on what you were talking about there for convenience and also like maybe booking flights too. I think also what people don't realize too that sometimes the stops are not necessarily cheaper than the direct flights, and and so it is sometimes marginal. We live in the state. We live in Central Florida, so there's a lot of flights that come out of the Fort Lauderdale, Miami area, especially if they go overseas or so on, or some major airports. Because we live in Central Florida, Orlando is a big hub for destinations for flights coming in, because we're a very big tourist area, so a lot of flights come into our area. But there's a lot of occasions where there's some smaller cities that don't fly directly into Orlando, and maybe they fly into Florida, Fort Lauderdale, or Miami. I thought you brought up a great point by taking, like, say, for example, instead of maybe a flight down there to transfer, because a lot of people have been having issues with changing planes and having delays, and delays is big these days. Delays are big, and you end up missing your connecting flight. Looking at an alternative like a Brightline, so okay, I have my flight out of Fort Lauderdale. It's a direct flight. It's better. It's cheaper. I live in Orlando. Take the Brightline down, and maybe like way before your flight were to take off, way before, or maybe even a day before, and then go ahead and then take your flight, doing connecting it that way, as opposed to taking a flight down there and then hoping to make your connection, right? I couldn't tell you the amount of times that my dad missed this connecting flight from Orlando to Fort Lauderdale to a different destination. It's almost borderline ridiculous at this point. I don't even know why they offer it. That's how much. And sometimes those windows are tight, 45 minutes, an hour, and one delay and you're done.
Yeah.
So I think that's a travel tip too. Like, I'm glad that Kevin brought that up about having there, and then also Ryan talking about the different features and what things mean. For me, I used to travel quite a bit with a previous company, but they used to book all my flights, so I didn't really do anything as far as travel. But the one thing I can say is that we used a lot of points. So the point system, if you're a person, like in Central Florida, we have a lot of transplanted New Yorkers down here, yourself included. And, a lot of people fly back to New York. And, one airline like JetBlue that flies there constantly, that usually has really good rates, a lot of people lock into maybe getting like a JetBlue credit card and racking up those points and using those points to fly back and forth, because that's the destination they go often. But you kind of have to be careful, because once you have that credit card, you're locked into that one airline, right?
Correct.
So I wouldn't always agree to go with, that's the bad part of, locking in with the airline. I wouldn't always agree with locking in with one airline, because, unlike if you're a Coke or Pepsi person, a lot of people don't have loyalties to airlines. They tend to shop around. As I get older, I tend to lean to certain airlines, but not just one. I learned to some major carriers, but they're, 2 or 3, not just one. So I try to use a credit card that could give me miles that I could maybe sign up for their memberships and then transfer those miles over to them when I can.
Right.
And they have partnerships. And you have to watch out. Some of them will make you pay to transfer these points, but some of them won't. Some of them will allow you to do it. And sometimes, depending on the airline, and then also depending on, you could probably buy miles really cheap. Like, sometimes it's really, for like a few bucks, pay for an extraordinary amount of miles that will help you later on. And I know someone who did that quite frequently. He would wait till they go on sale and then see the bottom line on them, and then buy them, and he was able to get like 2 flights out of them, even though he purchased them, which would have been far less than what he would have bought it for. But you would really have to be on top of your game all the time looking at that. The person I'm talking about in particular flew a lot, so he tend to always look at that. So maybe for the average person, you probably wouldn't be able to get on top of that too much, but if you have someone that provides miles that could be transferable to multiple airlines, that would be preferable, in my opinion, for credit cards.
So a good example of that would be the Chase line of products, more specifically their Chase Sapphire Preferred, their whatever the next tier up for that one is, Capital One, the Venture X. These are all cards that are going to be able to transfer the points into miles into different carriers. And then you have carrier-to-carrier transfer as well. Like Mahendra mentioned JetBlue earlier. JetBlue does have a partnership with the United, so you can use the points interchangeably between the two carriers. But they're not the only ones, right? So feel free to shop around. Feel free to pick and choose your credit card of choice. But I think those that sign up for credit cards that offer miles work best, because you're spending the money anyways. Might as well get rewarded for it in more ways than one.
Sure, I would agree with that. You have to watch out though, because some of these airlines, they have partnerships and that's great to transfer them, but sometimes they do stuff that is internal that's weird. So I looked at this the other day. JetBlue has this pool program, so you could pool points. So if you have like a spouse or a significant other with JetBlue card, you could pool those points. But since they have those programs, they don't allow you to transfer the points without paying for it. So now that they have a pool system, they want you to use that pool system, but I can't. But if Ryan had a JetBlue card and I cannot now transfer those points to a friend without paying now.
That's funny. That's interesting, actually, because they, as far as I knew, because I was a JetBlue card member for a while, they locked that option down completely. Like, they didn't even let you transfer to someone who wasn't within your own family. Usually, so as far as I'm aware, I think they locked that down completely now.
No, you can still do it. I tried to do it the other day, so I was mentioning it because they want you to use that pool program, right?
Okay.
But let's say we don't need the pool because you and I are friends, right? So but I wanted to gift you
a certain amount of points.
But now they're charging me for that. Where in the past they used to be able to gift these points before the pool program.
Gotcha. Okay.
The pool program is there now, so I knew somebody who's booking a flight, and him and his significant other had points. And they were trying to attempt to move the points one to the other. And they were like, nope, you got to pay unless you want to join this pool program. And they did. They joined the pool program, so now they pool the points. But unfortunately, it doesn't keep them separate right now. So now they're pooled together.
Yeah.
So if one uses it more than the other, well, if it's your spouse or significant other, that might work out. But that might not work out with friends. Right?
Yeah.
So that, because you'd be like, hey, wait a minute, these are all my points and now you're pooled with me. This is not helpful. But so, so you have to kind of watch out for some of those programs and be careful with those things. Another example of this, and Kevin could talk to this more, is the American Express and the Delta one, Delta Gold. American Express and getting like SkyMiles access and lounge access. You want to talk more about that? Yeah.
Yeah, I echo all of your points. I mean, there's a lot of great programs out there. The airlines are like, they're all kind of neck and neck with one another. Like you could win points either way, win points in an argument of like what's best, but it's ultimately dependent on kind of the routes that you take. So, I'm a Delta man, but that's really just because like at the point in my life when I considered getting a loyalty program and a credit card. Things started with the loyalty program. It was just that Delta was like the most abundant flight options that for the destinations I was going to was Delta. So I just found myself constantly booking that, and then kind of the amenities that came with the program were like very prominent in the locations I was flying to. So, LaGuardia is a huge like hub that they've done like a 10-year renovation on. It's like one of the largest locations. Like when you think of like the premier lounge access for Delta that they advertise, it's either LaGuardia or LAX. Both have had major renovations, and at that point in my life I was going to New York almost like 3 times a year, and then LA was on my bucket list. Atlanta I would go to work. I would go there for work often, so that's obviously kind of where they're headquartered and their main hub is for the entire company. So it made sense for me, but it is kind of like a rat race trying to chase those points. I mean, I think you can like put yourself into like more expense sometimes at like how they've kind of gamified the system of trying to chase points to get certain statuses.
Yeah.
They do award you like enhanced experience, but I mean that's subjective and how much you value those upgrades or those additional services that they might provide. So I think everyone does their own cost benefit analysis and they weigh kind of the incentives that come with it. For me, it all made sense. I'm a big convenience guy when it comes to airports. It's already a stressful environment. Anything I can do to kind of keep that more streamlined, simplified, it's worth the investment for me. And it just kind of lined up. So I would say, yeah, from a points aspect and kind of loyalty program aspect, Delta is the card that worked for me. But now that I'm flying to kind of more locations, I'm starting to question more on whether this is worth it because, now I'm getting to the stage where like other destinations are not well serviced by Delta. So there's probably more connecting flights, which come with more risk, as Mahendra mentioned. Like, the airline industry lately has just been a mess when it comes to like consistency. I've encountered almost a delay every time I've flown since the pandemic. So luckily I wasn't in a situation where I was like, dependent on my belongings, like making the trip. It's been carry-ons I've actually shifted to kind of carry-ons just to kind of shed off that kind of risk. But I'm weighing more options now. Like we talked about Brightline, and I think in New York I've kind of considered long-term like Amtrak's when I've had to kind of move through cities there. So I think everyone's weighing their options. It's kind of getting more expensive to travel. There's more risk associated with it, and depending on your life, deadlines are a big component, especially in business. So you need something reliable to not only kind of have a good experience, but to get to your destination. You could do a period there, but on time as well. So, kind of like a full circle, like overview of that. But, I think, it's all dependent on kind of your lifestyle and what you have lined up as far as destinations you want to go to and why.
Yeah, those delays are really interesting. Like I mentioned before, I used to fly a lot for the company I was with before, and we used to be able to take a flight in the morning, go to a meeting the same day. So when from the airport, get to the hotel, maybe not even go to the hotel. Sometimes just like, take a car to the meeting, and then from the meeting after that, go back to the hotel to check in, and then usually fly out in the morning or maybe even the same day. And we did that quite often, and these days I've noticed that from several people who kind of still was there and other people who travel, I've noticed that they're now booking like the day before. Like a lot of companies are booking day before because there have been so much delays that it's almost unfeasible for them to get there on time to do these meetings. So they're flying in the day before. If they could get a flight out the same day, great. But if not, they usually try to fly out the next day. It is a little bit more extended time, so puts in more cost to the company, maybe more hotel costs, etc. Sometimes stress on the employees too, because a lot of times when you're flying for business, that's for work, right? So you try to get back home to your families as soon as you can. So
right.
you try to arrange it so that you're not doing these flights to extend your stay because you're not on vacation. But then you end up doing that because of that, and that puts a toll on a person who's flying a lot for work, because that extends out time, right? Well, yeah, okay. So those were some great travel tips. I think that would probably be great to. Okay, well, we have some travel tips. Where are you going with these travel tips, right? These destinations we're going to. So, I think that would be a great transition into looking at places we've been. I think it'll be criminal not to start with our very own location, Central Florida, right? We live in Orlando, one of the tourist capitals of the world, of destinations of families coming in. Who wants to start about great places to see in the Central Florida, Orlando area?
I'll let Kev start this one.
Okay.
I would say, again, depends on kind of your lifestyle, but I think as a global tourist destination, like what's really put us on the map is Disney World.
Yeah.
So, I'd be remiss not to mention the theme park aspect. It's huge. Families like come from all over the world to visit Walt Disney World in the U.S. and Orlando, which, funny enough, is not technically in Orlando, but it's just a neighboring town nearby.
Sure.
And but not too far from the airport. I think that's like, since it is one of the most common destinations, I'll talk about that. Like if you're trying to get that experience, obviously your budget plays into it. You do your research. Disney World has 4 parks, so you kind of pick and choose if you have to divvy it up. But you're usually, I think, but for convenience sake, looking to stay near that area in those resorts. And depending on the time of year, that can be very pricey. And again, it depends on your budget. But I think there's other areas worth visiting outside of that area, or even staying in, to kind of encourage like exploring more of the city. Because I think a lot of people do not get the full scope of Orlando, or have a very limited understanding in that time in Disney, which is actually like Kissimmee Celebration area, like where they're staying. So that just, I don't think, encapsulates like all Orlando has to offer. So I guess one tip would be just kind of stay in Orlando proper. I think some popular locations, would be, closest to the airport. Lake Nona is a new developing city there that's like about 10 years in the making. So a very new modern city that's coming up and has a ton of like hotel options for all different types of travelers. The Winter Park area is excellent as well. That's a local's favorites just for dining and tourism as well. There's a big art district there also. So, depending on your interest, that could be like the prime destination as well, if it's not theme parks. But yeah, I mean, I think downtown Orlando certainly worth exploring. That's been has its ups and downs, but I think is on its way back up with major development the city has announced into it. I would say kind of Winter Park and Orlando give you that nightlife experience. I think they're the most densely populated, and of course downtown will give you that aspect, kind of that bar scene and club scene more in downtown. Depending on your lifestyle, what you're interested in, but yeah, I think there's a lot more to offer. There's like more kind of nature spots as well. Like where there's this big spot called Wekiva Springs.
I was about to mention that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very diverse. It all depends on your interests, and I think a lot of that is overshadowed by the theme parks that are super exciting. I think any traveler should experience that. But just I would say if you have a little bit more time to spend in Orlando, think a little bit more about those other interests you might have, because Orlando does have a lot to offer, and I think the food scene is like really underrated here in Orlando. It's a very diverse market and has a little bit of everything, and I think things like the Michelin Guide coming into Orlando a few years ago has really helped elevate the dining scene just in general, like across Florida as well. There's so many new great restaurants opening like every month, it seems like. So try to kind of venture out a little bit more and kind of take in the sights, try some of the food, try to explore a little bit beyond Disney, I would say, for kind of the global traveler.
Yeah. It would be remiss not to mention the other major theme park, but Universal Studios, Epic, they're down here, and is the other part of the combo of theme parks that are here as well. Hitting that, I think, to add to what you were saying there, you mentioned near the airport, and you also mentioned like a dining scene in Winter Park, but I think a really good combo of that is a well-known destination around here for many years for a tourist spot, which is International Drive, Dr. Phillips area. So you can hit the International Drive. It's always been a big-time tourist area, but then also at the same time, it's very close to Dr. Phillips area where you could get some great dining. in Restaurant Row, as we call it here for the locals, and get into local dining as well. But Winter Park, very good, very niche. I know a lot of people, when they travel, they try to hear where the spots the locals go, and Winter Park is definitely one of those places where the locals go, right? Lake Nona, once again, too, that's a place where locals go. We start to see some of the tourists actually kind of get in that area. I'm really surprised that there's not more hotels in this area of Lake Nona. There is one or two that are really good. But they need to, I think, maybe some more in the future, because that's really close to the airport here, and I'm glad you mentioned that too. I think another great Central Florida area is that since if you're going to visit Orlando and Orlando proper, as you mentioned there too, is that we're equal distant, a little bit shifted to the right, of the state, but because you're closer to the East Coast, but you can hit all the beaches, right? And we have world-renowned beaches, especially on the West Coast, where we have the Sarasota beaches and the white sand beaches there that are been ranked over the years by various publications as one of the top beaches, right? And on the West Coast, you have all the great beaches from Tampa to Sarasota to,
Clearwater.
Clearwater. Was that?
Bradenton,
yes. And then on the East Coast there you have, world famous Cocoa Beach, right?
Yep.
Daytona Beach, for those of you who have been around in the 90s, you remember spring break in the 90s? Well, that was all on Daytona Beach, right? So that was, and very unique experiences, and you could go there. And of course, Cape Canaveral, where, we have NASA, right? And that's always a spectacle to be seen. It's amazing to see. And one of those kind of lost arts of actually seeing the space shuttle on the pad, I do miss that. As a kid, when you would see that as a kid, you kind of took it for granted when the space shuttle would go up and you would see it. You now see like the SpaceX rockets and all these rockets, and they look cool, but nothing looked as cool as the space shuttle going up. I'm sorry, nothing did. Space shuttle was big, it was wide, it was loud. And a lot of people would drive out to the coast, only 4 or 5 minutes away from Orlando, and see that thing take off, and it was spectacular. But now you can still see those rockets go taking off too. So you could go there, and I think that's also another thing that people don't really talk about, is that going out to the coast, see something that we're very unique to Florida, right? Only other place you could do that, Texas, right? With their space program, and then and they really don't launch as much there. They land.
Yeah.
Right. But we launch, and they, that's you're not doing that in New York. You're not doing that in Ohio. You're not doing that in the Midwest. You're doing that right here in Florida. And I think that's a really unique experience that people should visit. The beaches as well, like I mentioned, underrated nature stuff. Like you mentioned, Wekiva Springs, where you could go canoeing, and you have all the. And then also not really in Central Florida area, but you could go into the Everglades and so on, right down south. But even out here, you could go out there and take airboats out, going towards the coast and going into those lands out there, swamplands and stuff like that too. Camping, there's lots of camping. Ocala National Forest for like about maybe 45 to an hour at a time, and then all kinds of great. No mountains. We don't have mountains, so we don't get to do that. But, we do have a lot of nature stuff, and it's really, I think, a lot of locals notice it. But and then, in addition to tourism stuff like the theme parks, I think those are pretty good other options. What do you say?
I said, I'd say outside of the general tourism, those are great options if any of our listeners are into that sort of thing. There is also some of the more, like you mentioned, Kennedy Space Center to watch the rockets launch, but they also have a visitors complex where you can actually tour and learn a bit more about NASA, right? And learn about the space program, which is always pretty cool. There's also, we're in Central Florida, but we're only a stone throws ride away via train on the high-speed train, the Brightline, to Miami, right? So you can always go down to Miami. It's a 3-hour trip via train. You can visit any of the cities along the coast: Fort Lauderdale, Boynton Beach, Boca Raton, etc. I would say, from an outsider's perspective, since I came from New York and have moved down here recently, one of the great things I learned about Florida, and especially Central Florida after hanging out with you guys, is that everywhere has its own little pocket area, right? It's not centralized to one specific location, but you do have a variety of different experiences in a variety of different locations, which I think is what makes Orlando really unique in that sense. So aside from visiting some of the more, like Mahendra mentioned, some localized areas like Winter Park, there's also other somewhat touristy attractions like Icon Park, right? And then there are, like, outside of theme parks, there's Legoland, there's what you mentioned, Universal and Epic. They are two separate parks, but they are both owned by Universal.
Yep.
Apparently Disney's coming out with a fifth park soon, so don't know where they're going to find the space for that, but I'm sure they'll figure it out.
I would add also like water parks. I think
Yes,
people
I was
think
going to
of
mention SeaWorld. Thank you. Yeah.
SeaWorld
And
like,
Aquatica.
Yeah, Aquatica. And I would say also tying into this, like, if you're considering not only water parks, but just Orlando in general, the time of year to visit.
Yeah.
For me, I would say think beyond the summer. The summer is unbearably hot here, and there's more than likely going to be showers and thunderstorms almost every afternoon in the summer. So rethink that. I would say a kind of late fall into almost December, where it is a drier season. It's clear skies almost every day, and average temps usually in the 80s. It's kind of perfect, I would say. And we've all done some traveling to different cities, and I think that time of year it's hard to beat the weather of Orlando in kind of late fall, because everywhere else is kind of getting that initial kind of chill, the early feelings of winter, and we're just getting kind of settled into this like just perfect period. So if it allows, like, depending on kind of your lifestyle and flexibility, time you can get away, rethink the summer, I would say. I think it just opens your world a little bit more to kind of fully enjoy the outdoor lifestyle as well, and the sights of Orlando a little bit better. So
That's a fair point. Thank you, Kev.
Yeah, I mean, I think today is so hot that I think Kevin was literally going to melt outside. I think it was going to happen. He's been in Florida a long time, and he's going to be melting out there. And I agree with him. It's extremely hot. But at the same time too, on all our northern listeners, maybe you find that comforting as you come down and say, oh, it's always cold up there. It's like you get to experience some of that. But I think that leads us into, weather. I think I want to talk about the weather in California, because we recently went out there. And I found it interesting, because that's the next destination I kind of wanted to talk about in California, and going up, we kind of went on the coast there. I was really surprised at how nice it was during the day, warm, but then it got cold. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of caught me off guard, because in Florida it just stays hot, mm-hmm. right? It's just like it's hot. If it's hot during the day, it's going to be hot at night. And up there, I was used to that in New York, where, it could be hot in the day and it's just cold at night. But, northern state, mm-hmm. I expected that. That's my thing. But I didn't expect that in Southern California, mm-hmm. that, you would get a weather change like that. But yeah, out there on the coast, I really enjoyed I enjoyed it a lot. It reminded me a lot of Florida, though, to be honest. I enjoyed the time there. It kind of reminded me of the same lifestyle that we live down here, the kind of lifestyle where you kind of enjoy the day, and then while you're enjoying the day, you also have a nightlife that you could go to. There isn't a hustle and bustle of like, well, we have to get in the house and lock up, whereas sometimes I felt like that in New York. We had to, like, because of the weather sometimes, or whether it be, or just like the stress of the day, it's really hard to get to places, and do it very conveniently. It felt like almost like a Florida thing, where you could go to your job, or you could go to whatever event you needed to do, come back, take a little rest, nap or something, and then head out for your nightlife, and then do that and then go back in, right? I would, the equivalent of that, I think, in the New York area, I think probably if you lived in the city, because then it would be, everything's in one location, right? So you're in the cities, you could live there, and then you also have your entertainment there. But if you lived in the boroughs, like I did, like in Brooklyn, Yeah, there was no nightlife where I was, right? So if you came back home, you spent hours get home by the subway, or in my case, like my dad driving all the way back home from Jersey, and then like, yeah, you're not going anywhere after that. You're stuck at home because you're just exhausted, right? Whereas that California life was really nice. We got to see some great things. We got to see Golden Gate Bridge, got to see Alcatraz. These are great sites. These are great sites to see in Southern California. Driving up the coast, highly recommend. You have anything to add about that coast trip there?
Yeah, I think LA, California has always like stood out to me as a New Yorker. I think there is like this symbiotic relationship they have in a lot of industries those two cities have together. And, it's interesting that, if you look at like the day-to-day Californian and New Yorker, it's a big juxtaposition. New York is big city, always on the move, like the hustle and bustle. And then California lifestyle is much more chill, relaxed, like lounging out by the beach, like enjoying like a nice rooftop, like being out there, just kind of enjoying the day, just to enjoy the day, with no other itinerary. So it's kind of a nice change of pace for me, kind of being brought up as a New Yorker, and then even to some extent carrying those ideals here in Central Florida, just having that kind of work ethic instilled in you, still lingers around in my day-to-day life here. But when I go to California, just like the tone and presence of the people there, it's much more relaxed and it's infectious in a good way. And I think I really found that kind of to be a relief, like kind of a weight off my shoulders going there. Like it's one of my favorite destinations to just truly be on vacation and decompress. The sights are great, the weather is great, and just that pace of life is really comforting. And the sights, again, as Mahendra mentioned, like just driving up and down the coast, just picturesque, like unreal at times. Like it's like you're in a fairy tale looking at these beaches.
Agreed.
The landscape of it changes quite a bit as well. I was very surprised just with like, obviously the topography and elevation, like we're going up huge hills and valleys and seeing vineyards just right next to beaches and rockfront beaches as well. Just like the change of scenery and landscape is pretty dramatic. I mean, it's a huge state. So that actually kind of like changed my perspective as well of kind of traveling via car and kind of just it clicking of just enjoying the sights of the road and like kind of just connecting with all of that and being present in the moment. Like I think being in very densely populated cities, metro cities, like you just kind of used to the surroundings and like you're not really thinking beyond what's in front of you. You're just focused on your destination. It's kind of repetitive, whether if it's a cityscape or a rural landscape going through Florida between cities, as that's pretty common. So there was very picturesque, and I was like, oh, I get it. I see why people take these long road trips. Thought of Highway 1 is iconic. One of the best highways to drive on in the world, just in terms of views. And then it even like kind of like piqued my interest of like Route 66 and taking other like historic scenic drives. So I have a lot to say about it, but I'll pause there. I think it just is a good change of scenery, and like the pace is a nice kind of relief, I'd say, from the hustle and bustle that I'm used to. And I just, can't say enough good things about it. I'll just leave it there. But I'm sure we all have our own version of that for our own lifestyle and kind of finding that solace in other cities as well. There's plenty I know on my list that I'm ambitious to kind of feel that out myself and see if there's some overlap there. So
nice. I don't know. Have you ever been on to the West Coast there, Ryan? If not, another city you might want to highlight?
So I have been. I haven't been to LA, but I have been to San Fran.
Okay.
I love it in San Fran. A few years ago, I had the pleasure of taking a trip out there with my brother. And we actually made it a weekend trip, which was great. We pretty much didn't really stop at the hotel beyond just to sleep. We made it an action-packed weekend of just things to do and stuff to do. And it was, for me, a great use of a Saturday and a Sunday. So all the major landmarks, Golden Gate Bridge, Alcatraz, small town of Sausalito on the other side, Lombard Street, Full House House, Mrs. Doubtfire House. We got to see, the Autobots, Optimus Prime and Bumblebee scattered across the street, which is awesome. I will say that for like you mentioned earlier, Mahendra, like for a coastal city, it does get pretty cool. And I think primarily that's just because of the cold coming off the water. Like, I remember when we were driving on the tour bus across the Golden Gate Bridge, you couldn't even see the bridge because of all the cool air rising from the water, mixing with the heat that was a sunny day in San Francisco and creating so much mist that you couldn't even see the rust of the bridge until you were passing right by the pillar.
Yeah.
And it was amazing to me because I'm like, you could see it from afar, and as you got close, it just kind of disappeared, which was amazing. Like, how the hell do you hide a national landmark? I have no idea. It was also great getting to pass by the Redwood National Forest. Those trees are huge. I'm surprised they've even managed to grow that high. It's ridiculously crazy how tall they've gotten, but they are America's tree, apparently. I think that's our national tree, is redwoods. And so it was great seeing those. I did get to see a exhibit about King Tut, which was pretty cool. They had one at the local museum there. And I think there was a couple other activities besides the really great food at Fisherman's Wharf. Walking around the wharf and the Embarcadero. It was a jam-packed weekend for sure, but it was a great weekend. I would love to visit some of the other cities of California, so LA, Santa Monica, Venice, and maybe a couple others while I'm there, just for the sake of saying that I've been there. Maybe go to a San Diego Comic-Con eventually someday. That'd be great.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think for West Coast, I mean, aside from Seattle, Washington, I think and Vegas in Nevada, but I think beyond that.
I think Seattle's great as well. I think I like that we're just talking about West Coast because we are East Coast guys, but, I think we've all kind of had curiosity just about the West Coast, like inspiring some of these trips and
for sure,
just trying to see like a change of scenery. And I think, we covered California really well. I think like the Pacific Northwest was eye-opening for me as well. I'm not sure about you, Ryan, but I remember like the biggest takeaway there for me, or like the first big impression, was how well I could breathe there. It's so densely populated with trees. And it sounds like a crazy thing to say, but it purifies the air.
It really does.
Yeah, it's like their ecology there, just the natural purifier. So it feels like for a lot of folks, like they could breathe for the first time going there.
I honestly can agree with that. As an asthmatic myself, it was always a struggle in New York of like being able to breathe on a daily basis. I haven't had, thank God, asthma attacks in like, I want to say 20 years and counting. Thank God for that. But I did feel that once I landed in California and just happened to be out in the open air, there's something about having that natural ecological system that you mentioned that, it really does kind of freshen up the air. I feel there's less pollution in there. Maybe if I went to LA, it'd be a completely different story. But being around that San Francisco area, I was the happiest I ever felt. My lungs were the happiest they ever felt. And it was a great time for sure.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you guys. Like, I mean, I get respiratory issues as well, and I was able to breathe a little bit better, especially in Florida. Sometimes where it gets like a little muggy to breathe and stuff like that. And New York too is pretty bad for me. But yeah, I think like you said, we're East Coast guys, and I think that's a good way to maybe transition into our hometown. New York City. If you're going to go out there to New York, and what are the places you think you might want to hit or hit recently? And it's kind of funny. Now that I mention that, as we talk about that, because like my mom about a year or so ago, we went to New York as tourists. We didn't go see any family or anything like that. We just went up there and stayed in the city, because like I said, I grew up in Brooklyn, right? And when I go back to Queens to visit other family, it's like, hey, I want to go to the city. They're like, ugh, because it's such a chore to get there, right? And everybody's like, oh my gosh, if you want to go to the city, we gotta take the train, or we gotta drive. It's gonna take forever, all that stuff. And we're in the boroughs. There's like 5 boroughs that make up New York. It's like, and then we can't get to one of the other boroughs. This is Manhattan. So we can't. It's just it's a pain. But her and I took a trip, and we specifically stayed in Manhattan. We were down Midtown and so on, and we did some of the touristy stuff, right? And even though we used to live there, we did get to do a lot of the touristy stuff all along the way. I mean, when I was a kid, I did do Empire State Building, and I did do Statue of Liberty. But if you ask me how many times I did that, it's like once, each time. Empire State Building, actually a couple of times, but Statue of Liberty. We attempted to do Statue of Liberty quite a few times. We were past it, or we couldn't land there. We finally did. We couldn't go up it. There was a lot of different things that we did, and but there was so we did a lot of touristy stuff in the city. We hit a lot of great restaurants, Central Park. We did a lot of historical places in New York, and it was really fun to do. The touristy stuff, even though I was born and raised there. It's like, and it was so fun. And my mom worked in Manhattan. You know what I mean? So, but we got a chance to do a lot of those touristy stuff, and New York is such a great city. Empire State does not do it justice. It just calls it the Empire State, but that city has so much history, behind it. It acted as our first capital before Washington, D.C. was built. You know what I mean? It was some of the greatest architecture, marvels of New York City built there with the skyscrapers and everything else. Statue of Liberty, Ellis Island, Brooklyn Bridge. I'm just naming one bridge, but dang, bridges? We got some bridges, people. Mm-hmm. We got a lot of bridges, and, just iconic places. And as I do that, I'm looking up, and I can see there's a painting on the wall there of one of our iconic bridges right there. So, just so much history, so much melting pot of cultures. Broadway, right? You have Broadway there. You have Financial District, Little Italy, Chinatown. Wow. All right, I'm going to the nostalgic here. I'm going to go over to Kevin here. Let's see what he says.
I mean, that's a big part of the magic there. There's so much diversity and cultures that are well embraced and preserved there. I think everyone has little pockets throughout New York City where you can kind of dip into another country's way of living. They've done a remarkable job of preserving the feel of a Chinatown is much different in that city. I'm sure there's several others that rival it, but you could go into some places and be hard pressed to find someone that doesn't speak Cantonese or Mandarin. They do such a good job at kind of creating these. They say it's a melting pot, and I think a lot of places like Manhattan and some of the bigger boroughs have it, but they also still have their separate pots as well that preserve the culture. And, again, you could dip into all of that. So, that's a good thing you brought that up. But, there's so much to New York City in general, spanning every interest you have. If it is architecture, if it is art, Broadway, film, theater, it has it all. It serves as kind of the mecca for a lot of creative industries, and still does today. And I think I can't say enough of good things about it. I think everyone will have their list, and depending on your interests, there's a ton of museums to pick from. There's tons of national landmarks to pick from. Architectural marvels from the bridges to the buildings. You have prime real estate there, Billionaire Row. You could see access to the best of the best in every field.
Dirty water hot dogs.
Yeah, that's all part of it. You know, the food as well. I think at all levels you could see things you can experience a New York hot dog. off the beaten path, and then also have kind of like Michelin star, 3-star restaurants there as well. And it's one of those cities, there's so much to do, so it's hard to kind of accomplish everything on your wish list. I think it's a city that, because of that, will keep you coming back, and it always evolves. So I mean, like, if we're talking just about like tips on there, I think obviously you'll have those landmarks, those attractions that are near and dear to you. You should try to make time for them. I think focusing on one borough at a time might be a little bit easier. As Mahendra mentioned, like, sometimes it can feel pretty like a chore to kind of get from one borough to the other, especially like if you're a visitor there, not understanding kind of public transit, which is huge. And I think an important tip to kind of like embrace. You're going to be lost. You're going to be confused at times. There's millions of people around that will help you. And, you do have like Uber if you kind of want to give up, but give it a shot. I think it's part of the New York experience. I think we've all been there. Like,
yeah, sure.
Staring at our phone, like wondering like what connection is to what platform do I have to get to? And then about to have a nervous breakdown because like I'm about to just give up and jump on the tracks because I can't.
If they say the Long Island Railroad shuts down at this time, it shuts down at this time, people. If you miss that train, you gotta wait.
That's so true.
Oh, man.
Just be willing. Just gives yourself some grace. Just know you're not going to get it right the first time. But I think I'd end it as well. Like, I think one tip that has been coming back to me and some other New Yorkers that I know that have given this advice to people that struggle with, like, there's so much to see. I don't know how I'm going to fit it all in. I don't know how I'm going to hit all of these restaurants, all of these attractions. And there's something to say about, like, just accept that you won't see it all and just take it all in. Like, walk around, just take less pressure off of it a bit, kind of have kind of sections of the city you want to carve out, and try to group them by interest. They're usually grouped together in that way grouped together in that way, whether it's, the Broadway, like film and theater has its own pocket, or, if you want to hang around Midtown, see Central Park, they are nicely grouped by interest there. But yeah, don't put that pressure. Kind of walk around. Like, don't chase like the hottest like restaurant, and go by feel. I think a lot of us, including myself, are like kind of glued to my phone on like scouring the internet for top reviews and comments on this restaurant. Like, no, they have the best pizza. It's been rated. It's been on Instagram. It's been on Facebook. And you go there and it just doesn't live up to the hype, where if you just took it at your pace, kind of went to that pizza spot that had a crowd, that had a cool vibe, you'd probably have much more fun there. So, it's a little bit unorthodox advice of like, try not to plan everything out. It's a huge city, but try to leave some space for exploration, I would say.
Okay, Ryan, what do you think about New York?
Well, growing up, I've had a great experience living there. I think so. My experience pretty much touches on the advice that you guys gave, but I think I'll include a little bit of my experience as well. Do you guys remember doing like field trips back in the day? So one of the most memorable field trips for me was my trip to the Statue of Liberty.
Oh, yeah.
Because we were actually the last group of students to go all the way up to the Crown.
Oh, I never got to do that.
So that was a great experience. I still have that view. Yeah. They closed it for renovations. Again, I just did air quotes for anyone not watching our video on YouTube, but they did renovations from that year onwards. So that was a great experience. Now you have that drone view of it, which is hit or miss. There is the Circle Line tour that goes around the Hudson River. So that's always a great way to see the landmarks if you're not able to visit Ellis Island or Statue of Liberty Island for, any reason whatsoever. Plus, it's great. It gives you a nice little, boat cruise around the city. You get to see the view at night or during the day.
It's a wonderful cruise.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's sorry to interrupt you, but if you take that cruise at night, the
city is so beautiful.
Yeah. So beautiful. Yeah. The skyline of New York City, going through all the bridges, seeing the Statue of Liberty lit up in its glory that close. It's really breathtaking to get that when the cruise comes around it.
Yeah.
The boat. The cruise. Well,
The
sorry.
ferry. I'm glad you're interjecting there. I think like I'll circle back to practical tips, but like that ferry ride, like to the Staten Island ferry, to kind of see both the Statue of Liberty and the skyline of New York, and most of the time it's free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like take that into account. Like I think there are a lot of like private boat rides that'll tour it, but the views from the public ferry are surprisingly good. So sorry to cut you off there. Just
no worries. No worries. I appreciate that. So I would say, and then I don't know about you guys, but I know like growing up, we didn't really venture. So before I get into that, Mahendra, you made a point earlier, and I want to address that real quick. And that was the fact that while you were in New York, having lived there wasn't that much touristy things that you guys did. And I think that represents a lot of New Yorkers, probably a lot of our listeners as well. I'd say the statistic is like maybe 2 or 3 out of every 10 people have actually been to any tourist area within New York, whereas a lot of people just don't go or just don't care to go. And I think it's a missed experience at the very least. So I will say that growing up, we would only go where we kind of knew, similar to Mahendra's mom. My mom worked in the city. She was my, I guess you would say, guiding star about what I learned about how to travel the New York public transit system. And it was interesting because we only went to where we knew, right, which is Midtown, which is where she worked. And then we went back home. As I got older, I started venturing out a little bit, and I would only go to still certain areas that I needed to go to. I wouldn't really venture out any more than that. It wasn't until I got to college that I started venturing out past Manhattan, into Brooklyn, into some of the other areas. So I began to learn the transit system a lot more and what connected with what. And so like in those travels and in that learning of the system, I got to see a lot of the great landmarks, right? So Empire State, I've been to One World Trade. I've done Summit Vanderbilt on 42nd Street. I've done Hudson Yards, Penn Station, all the major ones. But I would say or people that are similar to me that have done that represent a small minority in the group of New Yorkers that have done that. And it's a shame because in learning about the city in which you live, I think it's a great way to pick up clues about the city in terms of history, culture, restaurants, etc. But then like another great tip I found is whenever I travel, I'd like to do a bus tour of the city. And those bus tours that give you the narration of different aspects of the city or different key points or most popular areas of a city, you learn so much about a city so quickly from those tours. It's amazing. I even learned things when I hopped on one from Manhattan just for the sake of doing it. It was amazing. It's stuff I didn't even learn in the history books that they taught us in school. So, it's really interesting what you can pick up.
Wall Street had a wall. I mean, it did.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
why it's Wall Street. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, people though, there's so much history there. There's so many people, like you just mentioned, that don't even realize, when we were growing up there, that because for those of you who've never been to New York City area, the 5 boroughs that make up New York City, and I should tell you something, we have boroughs that make up New York City, right? Like this is massive. We don't just have like regular counties or little
cities
towns. We have
towns.
boroughs, right? I think the statistic may be wrong now, but I think if Brooklyn was by itself, it would be like the 3rd largest populated city in the United States or something like that. 3rd or 4th, something around there, right? It's ridiculously amount of people that are living there. If they were just that borough was off by itself, right? So that's how big New York City as far as population is concerned. Right, it's just like, so there's so many things to do, and like we mentioned before, I think the ability to travel around, you have public transportation, but I like to say this is that we live in Florida now, we live in Orlando. One of the great things that like I had family members that moved down here, they was like, oh man, I got home from work and I'm not tired and the sun's still out and what do you guys do? I said, we go out to dinner. We sometimes go out to dinner. Maybe we stay in. We invite some people over for some drinks. These are all things you can do. Do you have to do it? No, of course not. You don't have to, but you have the ability to do those things. You can relax, go watch some TV, or maybe engage with your kids a little bit. Maybe take them to soccer practice. Whatever you need to be doing. It's the kind of different lifestyle. Where in New York, I mean, I was growing up, born and raised. Like, I don't remember when my parents were coming home. It was middle of the night. Coming because they had to travel by train and come back home. It took forever. And then it was barely enough time to get dinner on the table, and then we were off to bed. And the next day.
To Kev's point earlier, I think the more your social battery is, you'll be able to figure out what area of New York City works best for you. I've got to see Lincoln Center. I've done the Rockette show at Radio City, the iconic Rockefeller Christmas tree. So many people come.
Oh, so beautiful.
New Year's Eve in Times Square with Dick Clark's New Year's Rocking Eve.
Oh, you've been to Times Square for New Year's Eve?
No, I was just about to say that as a New Yorker, I think it's a standing rule that none of us actually
I don't think any of us has ever done that. It's freezing out there, people. No, it's freezing, and there's no bathrooms.
Yeah, so people do wear diapers, so take that with you. But I'd say to Kev's point, it's like there's so much in New York City that you cannot take it all in one trip. You definitely, it will keep you coming back for more. And if you plan it out, it could be one of the best vacations you have. And yeah, I think that aside from the great food, I think everyone knows New York for their pizza. They know it for their cart foods. You know it for
chicken and rice. Chicken and rice.
You guys know it for everything you see in movies, but it's really so much more. And I think there aren't enough words to really kind of cover just how amazing New York is. Even though we live in Orlando now, and I've lived in New York for close to 30 years, I can't see myself going back to live, but I could see myself traveling back quite often to enjoy what New York really kind of stands for.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, I think, because of our lived experiences, we have a lot of, information about New York, right? And going up there, and it's kind of funny, and it's like, there's obviously a love you could tell from all of us here, from where we were from originally. There is love for Orlando too, and I love Orlando a lot. Spend the majority of my, other half of my life here, and now the majority of my life here, down in Orlando, and I love being here and living here. I think highlighting other places I've been that I really enjoyed. I know Kevin might talk about Boston in a little bit second, but I want to talk about Austin, Texas. I've been to Austin, Texas, and I really enjoyed that city. That city was an amazing city, and the people were great. The experience was great. The weather was great. The nightlife was fantastic. It was just such a great city, and also another city full of history. If you guys haven't figured out by now, I love a lot of historic stuff, and I like to visit a lot of historic things. And Austin was one of those things. I think if you're ever meaning to visit, it's definitely worth the visit. If you're going to Texas, I know a lot of people want to go to Houston or Dallas, and those are all great. But you definitely should check out Austin as well. It's such a great town, and they don't. It says, it's a little weird, right? Yeah, it's a little weird, but in a good way, in a great way, actually. And it's a fun town to be a part of. Kevin, what are the cities you'd like to highlight?
I think Chicago made a good impression on me. Yeah. I think it was interesting perspective as a New Yorker, kind of seeing a little bit more of a civil take on the New York subway system and public transit system. There's obviously parts of every city, including Chicago, that, are rougher than others. But, as far as a downtown, I think that's an interesting position within the country. They have the Great Lake just right there. As a view, it's breathtaking. It's hard to imagine how vast that lake is until you see it. And then just great food scene as well. The pace was a little bit slower than New York and more comfortable in a similar regard of how a bit of a relief transitioning. California would be the opposite end of the New York kind of pace in my lived experience, kind of comparing city to city. But Chicago stood out quite a bit. as was an interesting kind of juxtaposition of New York City. A lot of history and culture there, of course. I would say, I haven't gone to Austin, but spent time in Dallas. Really fun city as well. Great restaurants, really nice people that I kind of got to interact with there. Spent a weekend. And yeah, I think across the U.S., we said the Pacific Northwest, Seattle was up there. I think Vancouver as well, not too far, kind of first border crossing over land that I've done as an adult. So that was kind of a cool experience, just realizing kind of how small this world can be, even though it is so vast. So you could just enter into a new country, in certain positions where you're at. So, and then it's vastly different there, I would say, from Orlando or New York. But, that pocket of the Pacific Northwest has similar lifestyle, very picturesque with their treescape, and Vancouver is a bustling city right there on the ocean as well. So that was really kind of a serene visit there, just because there's a good blend of city and nature, and with Seattle and Vancouver, and they've kind of embraced those elements. They preserved species of trees. They're weaved into the cityscape. Gardens are on kind of out overlooks on several buildings. So it's interesting to see different sites, I'd say. And the U.S. has a lot to offer. I think that's been a realization I've had several times over the last decade, but just most recently, with California opening my eye a little bit more to just how beautiful this country is, how many different options, and how much history, obviously, and sights to see. And I think the World Cup event being hosted in the U.S. really brought that to light in that sense much greater. Just getting people's itinerary from other countries, using that as an opportunity to kind of visit Orlando as well, but kind of the U.S. For the first time, and hearing kind of what's on their list of places I have to hit in the U.S. while I'm here, and why. There's people that said just about the hiking trails and kind of the Grand Canyon and certain architectural marvels as well, and nature, world wonders that cannot find outside of the U.S., which I think kind of goes over my head a bit, just the appreciation of that. So that's kind of been a restored kind of perspective that I'm glad I have now.
Yeah, that perspective was great. And I also think it was also funny because it was we didn't realize how big everything, because America, they didn't think about it. A lot of them are coming from European countries where they're, kind of smaller to get to country. And then our states are huge. Mm-hmm. The continental United States is really hard to travel or go across. They thought they could get to one place or the other. And they're oh, no, it takes a long time. He's yeah, it really does. How about you, Ryan? Any other cities you would like to highlight that you've been to?
No, I don't think there are more because I just haven't been to as many as I would like. But okay. I have a family member who's an avid traveler, and he gave some pretty good advice that I'll share because we are talking about travel tips and stuff like that for our listeners. So I think one of the pieces of advice that he's kind of mentioned is that regardless of where you travel, most cities, you really only need about 3 days, 4 max, to really kind of experience the central core aspect of that city. You can always go back for an extended stay, but it was really minimum, I would say 3 to 4 days. So that got me thinking about because the United States is so diverse and we have so many great cities here that we can't really all kind of see in one go, obviously. I always thought about the idea of taking weekend trips to different cities. And if I found a city I really liked, or there was things that I really liked to do, I would go back for an extended stay. But I think it would be great to kind of at least spend maybe over the course of, let's say, 2 years or 3 years, every couple weeks, just go travel to another state, stay the weekend, see what it's like to, for just a small miniature version of what that city could offer, and then go back if you want to, if you like it and had a great experience. I would say that I think the one other city that I will highlight is Raleigh, North Carolina.
Okay.
Last year I did work on a project out there, not too far outside the city of Raleigh, so I had to fly in there. Great town, everyone's super friendly. It's definitely an emerging town in terms of diversity. It's been great in terms of restaurants, I think. It definitely gives you a little bit of a touch of Southern feel as you come down from any Northeastern state. So you get your first exposure there in the city. And it's just been, overall, it's a really nice thing. It's very similar to Orlando in a lot of ways, where you have to travel. Unfortunately, there's not that big of a transit system there yet, I think. But it was a great city nonetheless, I think.
Oh, okay, great. Well, I think that leads us into our final topic, which is places we would love to go. We also didn't really touch on, it was interesting. Before we get to that, we didn't touch on anything international we've been to. We stayed domestic a lot, which was really interesting, because I think that's a lot of our recent experiences, and I think that's, like you said too, Kevin, it kind of opened up our eyes to what we've seen. Maybe for another day. But yeah, some international travels. I've been over to Europe, and there's some great cities over there. I know Ryan, he went over to Australia too, and there's some great cities there. And Kevin, you've been around as well in various cities. So yeah, there's some great cities out there. But so getting into our last topic though, cities we would like to get to. This is going to sound really funny, or odd, but the new season of Ted Lasso came out. Mm-hmm. And in the first episode, which I thought was interesting because we're giving some background on what Ted has been doing for a while, and coming into Kansas City where he's at. It was a really good love story to his town, to Kansas City. Mm-hmm. They showed a lot of great monuments of the town, how the people are, how friendly everybody is, and that good Midwestern hospitality, the local shops. All those kind of things, and it was a good love story to that city. I thought that was fantastic. I didn't expect that, going into the new season, that they would do that, and it made me want to visit Missouri. It's like I want to see it, and if that was their intention, they got me hooked. I think that's one of the places I definitely want to go visit out there. Definitely want to do more of that. I didn't get a chance to. Some of my cousins got to go to Tennessee. They got to go to Nashville, and I didn't get to go to that trip. And I think I want to take a trip out there too. I want to see more of the U.S. And explore a lot more things. I want to get into the mountains and do those things, and really enjoy what we have to offer here in Alaska. I want to get back to Alaska. I did a short trip there, and I get a chance to explore Alaska. I want to get back there. I want to do that too. These are all there's some great places out there I want to hit in the United States, and those were a few. What about you, Kev?
Yeah, I'd say I'm thinking of, like some of Ryan said, just about like kind of setting out weekends, carving that up just to kind of see those destination cities. And I think a big deterrent, I guess, for me in the past is just like not only the expense, but like building that out for a town I have no connection to.
Yeah.
So, I'm hoping I find meaning in that and have like this, this deeper sense of connection to the city. I've been fortunate where, I've been able to travel a lot for work. That's given me the reason to visit other cities. But I think like there's something to say about creating interest or creating like a reason beyond just the wanting of seeing more. But like I'm thinking of like kind of aligning hobbies and interests. Personally, I'm a huge tennis guy, but I've heard of like I mentioned the World Cup, like people traveling for their love of soccer, and
yeah.
I think sports is a good outlet to give yourself a reason to see the city, see different cities, travel the world, and I think that's a unique experience as well. I mean, not only like a unique reason to travel, and there's that added plus of gaining perspective and connecting to the city. But you know, a lot of times like these sports, you know, where the games are held are in major cities. They're in city centers, and you know, being part of like those sporting events is a huge cultural experience to a lot of countries and cities around the world. Like you mentioned Ted Lasso. I mean, soccer, football is huge over there.
Yeah.
It's a big part of the fabric of that society, and what it means to have the experience of an Englishman or woman, you know, is kind of that fun rallying for a team at a soccer event, and kind of like that the pub experience kind of extends to that. In the U.S., you know, we have sports bars that are a big part of kind of capturing the essence of those sporting events if you're not able to attend. But I think a lot of these stadiums too are like marvels as well. They pump millions of dollars into it. It's like the highlights of a lot of even like smaller cities and their claim to fame of their sports teams. They mean a lot to not only Americans, just like all across the world. Like and kind of that excitement is infectious, and I think can really bolster your experience when you're visiting a new city. So for me personally, I think I'm trying to align that with like tennis tournaments, local and large. You know, I think Australia, Ryan's got to visit there. I think, you know, that's one of the Grand Slams. That's for me, you know, personal goal of mine, and, you know, destination as well. I've always wanted to explore Australia, but I just hadn't had a reason beyond just the want. Is like, what else can I capture to create some sense of urgency?
You can capture a kangaroo, I'm sure.
I might get captured by a kangaroo. But yeah, for me, that's been my kind of newfound like secondary purpose, not only to explore the world, but do it through a hobby I enjoy, through a sport, kind of a sports team, or just the culture in general, like whether it's tennis, some people have that with soccer, or baseball, football, what have you. So for me, that's like opened the door to a lot more destinations. And I know for me, I kind of want to explore more of Europe. I've only really got to see London, but you know, Spain, France, Greece, all of those countries have been on my bucket list. And I think if I can capture a tennis tournament as well, that's just the you know, the icing on the cake.
Yeah.
So for me, I think that's like creating that sense of urgency to kind of gamify it a bit, the experience of travel, and kind of tick off those boxes of like, I not only went to this destination, but I've got to participate in this really unique championship to a sport I love. So I probably talk about tennis too much with the guys separately, but I think whatever your interest is, like, think about that, other ways you could tie it in. I know, you know, Mahendra's family is into cricket, and that's taken his father all around the world. So
yeah, I was about to add to that. Yeah, so that's something that he, you know, in his retirement, he still plays cricket, and he has friends that play, and the team he's on, and they're in a league too, and they take that opportunity to travel and play the game, right? So they see the world through those eyes, and I think that's so amazing that he gets to do that, because he goes around and he has a group of friends, and he travels with the team, and they get to go, you know. It was funny to go to Texas recently, but then they also been to Australia and then, you know, New Zealand, you know, all that, and they you know, they've been to Thailand, and they've been to the Philippines, and you know, all that stuff. So lots of great places. That's another place I would love to go. I'd love to go to Thailand. I'd like to hit Tokyo. If we talk about stuff overseas, I would love to go to Thailand. I'd love to go to Tokyo. Actually, any parts of Japan, really. You know, like lots of parts of Japan I would like to get out to. But, you know, Ryan, where are some places you would like to highlight that you would like to go?
I think domestically would be like to see the Grand Canyon, maybe Scottsdale, Arizona, from what I've heard of it, Vegas, Nashville for sure, Seattle, as Kevin mentioned earlier, maybe Vancouver. let's see, is there anything else locally that's got my attention? Not really. Oh, the three of us have talked about a trip to see Mount Rushmore. So I would love to, experience
South
that.
Dakota, yeah.
I think internationally, I've been to quite a few places already. I've been to London, I've been to Paris, I've been to Amsterdam, Panama, Dominican Republic, Bahamas, London. A couple years ago, I went to Hawaii. I think 3 years ago. Last year was Australia. I would say on my list of places to visit, similar to you guys, would be Japan. Thailand. It would be a trip to Greece, any of the islands. But I'm like you, Mahendra, I love history. So I really want to go to Athens. Mm-hmm. Barcelona or Madrid in Spain. The Amalfi Coast in Italy. I'm just a sucker for pasta in general, so anything Italian works. So I would love to go see the Colosseum in Rome, Amalfi Coast.
It's so beautiful.
Let's see. Is there anything else? There were... Well, I've been to Australia, but I haven't been to New Zealand, so I would love to do that. Mm-hmm. I've mentioned Hawaii, but I love the Hawaiian culture. And I would love to experience visiting the Samoan Islands and the Fiji Islands as well. And I would say that more cities in Europe for sure to kind of build out my experience in that world map. Kevin mentioned the ease of traveling for landlocked countries like that earlier when he talked about traveling from Seattle to Vancouver. It's very similar in Europe. So I would say maybe a trip from, let's say, Amsterdam to Belgium, right? To go get some waffles, or like visiting Germany in like Christmas time, since that was the origin of Christmas, right?
Yeah.
Just to get to experience that. And I think there might be a small other handful of cities, maybe like Vienna, Austria, Brussels would be great. Prague, Czech Republic. And yeah, I'd say I have a wide variety of tastes, but like Kevin, I also do enjoy tennis. So if I can knock off a couple of those by visiting a couple opens while I'm at it, definitely won't hurt.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, we do. We all three of us took a trip to the Miami Open, and it was a great way for us to see the Miami and also see the tennis tournament. Combine those two things and have a good weekend. We gotta do another trip, guys. We need to do a trip together. We've done like trips separately together and separately, and then together partially. We gotta do another big all three of us trip there. But okay, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's there's a lot more to explore, right? Mm-hmm. As far as the future is concerned. I think this is a great. I think I learned a lot right here. This is a great topic to talk about, and later on maybe we'll do another pod on where we've been and get an update. And we'll be like, oh yeah, we haven't gone anywhere. Oh wait, But anyway, thank you everybody for joining us today and listening to our podcast. Remember, we're castnetpod@gmail.com. We're available at wherever you listen to podcasts. Available on YouTube as well. And please click like and subscribe. We appreciate you guys listening to us. Otherwise, it would just be us talking to each other, right? Anyway, thank you for joining.
We appreciate it, guys. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at CastNetpod, right?
Yep.
And as well as, if you like this episode and you want to see more content like it, feel free to comment down below and let us know where you guys have been, any travel hacks that you've heard about and want to share. And we look forward to seeing what you guys have to say. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you guys in the next episode.
Peace.